When a person thinks of Memphis, Tennessee, they might think of barbecue, music, Beale Street, basketball, and giant pandas. In April of 2003, Yaya and Lala arrived at Memphis Zoo. Not only was our zoo changed, but so was Memphis.
For the first time, the people of Memphis were not only able to see giant pandas, but also experience the culture of China.
Which is why the Memphis Zoo has one of the most astonishing giant panda exhibits in the nation.
Welcome to China. In 1987, the Memphis Zoo was home to a panda named Shuwa, but only for about a month. Within that time, just 31 days, 240,000 people came to the Memphis Zoo to see her.
Guests began to wonder why there were no pandas at the Memphis Zoo. At the time, pandas were very rare animals and an endangered species, with only about 1,000 remaining in the wild.
Many zoos around the world would like to have giant pandas, but have been unsuccessful. So how did Memphis get them? How did two beautiful giant pandas make their way to the Bluff City? Well, this is the story about how China and Memphis, Tennessee intersected.
Around 1996, closed-door discussions of the Memphis Zoo hosting giant pandas began. Also in 1996, Tennessean Jim Sasser became the United States ambassador to China, with the task to help rebuild and expand relations between the two countries. Sasser began to have conversations with Chinese government officials in March of 1999 about panda research being conducted at Memphis Zoo. Sasser worked hard and began to gain the respect and trust of the Chinese. Eventually, he began to have conversations with Chinese government officials, like the president at the time, Jiang Zemin. Sasser once heard Zemin say many times that the Chinese people know a lot about America, but the American people know little about China, thus sparking the idea of not only having pandas at the Memphis Zoo, but making it an educational experience for visitors to learn and celebrate Chinese culture.
Zoo officials and members of the Chinese Association of Zoological Gardens came to an agreement and signed a letter of intent in April of 1999. Soon, Sasser would be headed to China to meet with the embassy in China to propose the new exhibit here in Memphis.
Thanks to Sasser's conversations and hard work, the panda exhibit and loan was something that did not seem too far-fetched. In the summer of 2001, crews broke ground on a $16 million exhibit that was to be an authentic representation of Chinese culture. Architect Ace Torrey knew that this exhibit would be one that would gain international attention. Memphis Zoo officials and staff understood that even if the Chinese State Council did not grant Memphis Zoo access to the pandas, the zoo would still have a perfect place to showcase other Asian animals.
They asked us to design it. We knew it had to be something beyond what everyone else had done. There was an organized trip that we flew to Washington to meet with the Chinese delegation. And of course, we had these huge drawings that were about 3 feet by 2 feet. So we met with them, presented it to them. And at first they were mystified. Like, is this a cultural exhibit or is this a giant panda exhibit? But you could see they were really enthused about it because it took them to a place where none of the other exhibits had taken. We actually had to go to mainland China through several different entities to try to find a way to get the accurate tiles and imagery that in colors that actually took samples off a lot of the pavilions there to make sure it was as accurate as possible to convey the beauty of the gardens of Suzhou. We used that as a vehicle to run the experience through. Moving from Beijing into Suzhou, we took you through that whole experience. You know, we had broken up this thing into so many experiences that the courtyard, the gardens, moving to the exterior, then the interior exhibits, the tea room, the dragon walk, and the exhibit exit experiences that even though you might have waited 45 minutes in line to get to see the wonderful giant pandas, you were in China experiencing the culture, art, history, iconography, people, ongoing chronology of a 5,000-year continuous history entity that you were there halfway around the world. We're really excited to have a chance to take a culture, which there wasn't a whole lot known about at the time, but present it in a way that was romantic, that it showed the beauty and depth of the culture. It also showed the plight of this beautiful animal. China's a complete story.
Research teams from the Memphis Zoo worked to present the proposed research programs that would take place at the Memphis Zoo to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Later in July, Sasser brought Chinese Ambassador Yang Jieshi to Memphis to see the China exhibit. Jieshi loved the exhibit and was very impressed with the work that the Memphis Zoo had done to make this a one-of-a-kind experience for guests.
So zoo officials decided to go ahead and open the much-anticipated China exhibit, even though the stars of the show were not yet approved to come. But that did not stop visitors from coming and enjoying other animals, as well as admiring the authenticity of the exhibit.
How'd you like to travel to the other side of the world? Well, tomorrow you're invited to the inaugural weekend of the new China exhibit at the Memphis Zoo. Visiting the new $15 million exhibit is kind of like stepping into the mysterious world of China. The zoo had hoped to open the exhibit with a pair of giant pandas, but the Chinese government isn't expected to approve the loan of the pandas until this fall. Still, there's plenty to see. The China exhibit opens to the public tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
It was like Memphis getting a big shot in the arm in terms of feeling good about being a city, a great city that's progressive and on the move. Part of our vision was for Memphis to have a world-class zoo. And in order to have a world-class zoo, it was paramount of importance to have the pandas. So the timing was good at the time the pursuit started, because former Senator Jim Sasser was the United States ambassador to China. And so there was the opportunity for Memphis, if we could acquire the panda bears, to take us to the next level.
As guests entered the exhibit for the first time on July 13th, their breath was taken away as they entered to see a 50-foot auspicious light pagoda.
Guests could peek through and try to get a glimpse of the rest of the exhibit through octagonal openings into a sculpture garden featuring Lake Tihue stone. Sculptures surrounded the courtyard featuring pillars with perfect perforations and hollows that were patterned after decorative limestone from the Lake Tihue region of China. An open-air pavilion dedicated to Jim Sasser sits in the middle of the exhibit. In the first half of the exhibit, the Chinese cultural influences are mostly those of Beijing, as the tiles are very bright and elaborate. Pandas are native to Sichuan province, so as guests move closer to the potential home for pandas, the decor becomes more simplistic to reflect that area. There is a 1-ton, 5-foot-tall, and 3.5-foot wide bell in the courtyard that ushered visitors in and out of the theater that played an original film that promoted panda conservation. In Chinese culture, evil spirits are thought to travel in straight lines, so there is a spirit bridge that is angled to keep those evil spirits away from the exhibit. Guests can also find a traditional Chinese tea garden, perfectly displaying Chinese culture through its decor. The covered panda day rooms allow perfect visibility and plenty of roaming room for what we all hoped would be 2 pandas.
One of the best things about Memphis Zoo's panda exhibit is it's more than just a panda exhibit. We were able to incorporate so many other species. There's songbirds from Asian regions, and there's waterfowl. We have a variety of geese and a variety of ducks and magpies and cranes and pheasants. And so it's all this color and all these different sounds and different forms of architecture that it isn't just about giant pandas. It's about actually feeling like you're in China. And it wasn't just dependent on having giant pandas. So people came to visit and still had an incredible experience, and it was a very immersive experience that only improved once giant pandas came to town. One of the best things about coming online with giant pandas after the other 3 institutions in North America is we were able to learn from them best practices and apply them right off the bat here. And so, for example, we don't have giant exhibits, but we have very complex exhibits. We have exhibits that are well soundproof and well weatherproofed so that we can control the temperature and we can control crowd noises, things like that. We have trap doors in the back of the exhibit, so we're able to deliver food directly to the bears very quickly without having to shift them off of public view.
So Chinese diplomats traveled to see the exhibit for themselves, and they were astounded at the attention to detail and the excitement at the zoo.
Both the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the State Council of China approved the lease, and on April 7th, Yaya and Lala arrived at their new home, eating plenty of bamboo and ready for a long nap. The city was full of excitement as a custom FedEx jet called Panda Express with a portrait of giant pandas landed around 3:30 p.m. at the Memphis International Airport, holding Yaya and Lala, but also Memphis Zoo staff and Chinese diplomats.
You would have also thought that Elvis Presley had shown up, or the President of the United States. Where's some of the people that were so happy, and children? It was just a marvelous moment in the history of Memphis when the pandas arrived.
When Senator Sasser went to be our ambassador over there, it was just a natural thing for FedEx to the Panda Express with all of the right, cages and attendants and beautiful bears. The one diplomacy that's indisputable is the love of people in the United States and the love of people in China for these beautiful panda bears. So it's the ideal place to have these pandas, and FedEx's relationship facilitating trade between the United States and China make it a natural, because our biggest hub is here in Memphis.
Yes, I was on the Panda Express plane. It was an experience I'll never forget. My role at the time was assistant curator. That was kind of my introduction into the world of planning a complete exhibit. And of course, it was most exciting because it was giant pandas, and just the opportunity for that is just unreal. My job was to interact with animal care staff and everyone at the Beijing Zoo, which is a very large zoo, and learn everything I could about pandas. And so we had big animal crates that the pandas would be individually put in for the plane ride back. And yeah, it was just a big preparatory thing for flying 2 pandas back to the United States, which was a very unusual thing at that time.
When the pandas arrived, it was a banner day. It was a day unlike any other, really, in the history of our great zoo. And so people were thrilled. Obviously, all of the media outlets, including ours, covered this with a top priority, focusing our cameras on these amazing animals and on the children and the families that came here to experience pandemonium, the experience of these giant pandas, Lala and Yaya, right here in our city. And so there was joy in River City to have these animals here, and we recognize that we are among a handful of zoos in the United States that celebrate the presence of giant pandas from the People's Republic of China, and they are cherished to this very day.
Putting them into their crates and actually getting on that plane was something else. It was super exciting because we had been there for 2 weeks and we're excited to go home, but we were delivering the coolest package in the world. They put the nose down right where it was supposed to, so when we landed, there was all kinds of fanfare, and because we had been in China, we didn't know exactly what was going to go on at the airport. So we landed and opened the door and we stepped out and everybody cheered, and there were satellite trucks and it seemed like everybody from any kind of media was there. So the Memphis Zoo had done it. A small zoo in the Bluff City had not only created this beautiful exhibit, but it also become one of 4 zoos in the nation to host giant pandas. Guests were lining up to get a glimpse of the pandas. Memphis was truly in pandemonium.
Another important aspect of hosting Yaya and Lala was not only to benefit the Memphis Zoo, but to help with the conservation efforts of giant pandas. The original film that played in the China Theater challenged viewers to think about what we are doing right here at the Memphis Zoo to help save them. Plans for research included gene banks, studies on bamboo nutrients, and developing ways to identify pandas through non-invasive sampling.
One of the things for me that makes our acquisition of pandas so important, it was really a turning of a chapter for the Memphis Zoo, because there had been people that had done research at the Memphis Zoo, scientific research, for years prior to getting pandas, but there was very little of that, and it wasn't an official part of our mission. But when we were preparing to get pandas, it had to become an official part of the purpose of the Memphis Zoo, scientific research. Specifically and foremost with Chinese colleagues to benefit the giant panda in the wild. One of the things that pandas did that isn't often talked about, but that was very significant, was it was the reason why we created a conservation and research department here with staff scientists and a budget and a purpose and a mandate. That was only because of giant pandas, and today we're doing research still on giant pandas, still with Chinese colleagues, but we do a lot of other research too. And again, it's just because of Lola and Yaya, that's why.
About 95% of what our giant pandas eat is bamboo, so needless to say, they're really reliant on it. But we're lucky enough to have the environment here in Memphis that we can grow about 7 different species of bamboo. We have 10 acres off property where we grow those 7 species. We also pay very close attention. We have almost 20 years of nutritional data now. We measure everything that goes into our pandas and everything that comes out. We monitor where the bamboo was cut, we monitor what species it is, we monitor how old it is, so that we are able to then target and harvest from sites that are exactly what our bears are telling us that they need right at that moment. And that's really unique to this environment because we have so much growing right here that we can really serve up exactly what the bears need.
Our initial priority with research with giant pandas was to focus on reproductive physiology because we wanted to breed our pair of pandas. That's done with science, that's done with pregnancy tests and hormone monitoring. So that was the first scientific work that we did here. As we began to do that and get results on that and begin to understand their reproductive cycles, other questions come up, as it always does with scientists. The other thing then we focused on was the amazing adaptations and physiology that giant pandas have evolved in order to feed primarily on bamboo, which is the last thing you would think that an animal would eat would be bamboo. It's like eating 2x4s from Home Depot. Questions about how pandas eat bamboo began to make us wonder about the bamboo itself and the forest ecology of those plants. And so we did a lot of work with Chinese colleagues in China to look at indicators of bamboo forest health and the life cycles of bamboo forests. So we started with reproduction and we ended just looking at the science of the entire landscape where pandas live.
It was a remarkable day for our city. All of those things went together to make the pandas residents of Memphis and our zoo. So it was just a euphoric day for the city, and I'm sure that generations now of children and zoo lovers will tell you that the pandas are among the most favorite.
This exhibit, if you closed your eyes and opened them, it would help you to think you are in China. Great care was taken by the architects and the builders to be absolutely true to Chinese architecture, to be absolutely true to every design element, from the paving stones that you walk in on to the bell that you see as you enter at the Great Gate, all the way leading up to the giant pandas. It's a magnificent thing. And of course, there's a history piece to it. Millions of dollars were spent by the city of Memphis, the state of Tennessee, and our benefactors to create an environment that looks exactly like China.
I think one of the challenges we have in society is really understanding the culture and of other countries and where people come from and their thoughts and identity and history. And this, on a very small basis, helps Memphians really understand the incredible culture and history of China. And I'm so thankful that we've been able to partner with the government of China on this exhibit and really appreciate that.
Big piece, I think, when you were in the exhibit, especially with the pandas, is all the excitement of everyone coming to see them. So you could really see the joy it brought everybody, but as well, the whole experience is so foreign for everybody that it's really one of the only places you get to have this.
I remember the first time I brought my son before my daughter was born, and the build up to get to where we actually saw them, and there was this feeling of, oh my gosh, you know, those are real pandas. Because at that point, you'd only seen pandas in books or on TV and movies. As a Memphian, I realized the impact that this was having on our city, on our zoo, and realizing that the zoo, when I was a child, had just exploded into something that we never dreamed about way back when, but it's still that great zoo that we remember as children.
For Memphians, Yaya and Lala have become like family members, growing up with them over the course of 20 years. Guests have celebrated birthdays with them, sent them artwork to hang in their day rooms, and watched them grow. These pandas are not just pandas, but they are part of our community. Yaya and Lala have taught us to celebrate different cultures. They have taught us to try new things. They have taught us to attempt to seek peace in difficult situations. They are the perfect representation of two countries coming together for a common goal: the love of animals.